Right, so this is a recording of a talk that I gave on the 1st of March down in Cornwall at the Stover Country Park for the British Dragonfly Society. And it was a really good day. It was organised by Dave Smallshire, who's the Devon County recorder for dragonflies and damselflies. And collectively they're known as Odonata, so Odos for short. And there were lots of speakers there. As I said, it was a brilliant day. And I was given the opportunity to talk about my experiences over the past 4 years as a volunteer Odonata recorder for South West Lakes and how it came about. So I've called it Striking a Balance, and I'll explain that later. But to begin with, this is how I found myself with this very nice lanyard and an ID badge at 3 local reservoirs, and how my dragonfly enthusiasm, some might say obsession, began. So I moved to Bideford in the winter of 2021, and I very rapidly got involved doing conservation work at this little nature reserve in Bideford, Godborough, and it's a Devon Birds nature reserve. It's about 70 acres, and we very rapidly realised as the season came on that there were dragonflies and damselflies present on the site. It's got 3 lakes, and we haven't got a clue what any of them were. And we got books and we did a lot of peering, but we rapidly realised that we actually needed some proper experienced help. So there's a Tai Chi saying that when the student is ready, the master appears. And so it was. And here's Andy McGeaney in his natural habitat, and he was a former president of the British Dragonfly Society, and luckily he'd moved to North Devon relatively recently, and we invited him to come over, and he kindly came over and started to teach us about what we had got living at Godborough. So I was spending an awful lot of time by the lakes, by the ponds, there are only ponds at this stage, that summer at Godborough, learning the basics, including seeing lots of large red damselflies. So I'd got familiar with those. But to my delight, that July, I saw something different, and I saw a red damselfly, but it had red legs. And it was one species I did recognise, as I'd previously been shown them down in Cornwall by Dave Thomas at Breeney Common. And they're quite a rare species. So it was a really good find. Andy came over rapidly to confirm, and we had a new record for the area. So I was very excited by finding the small red, and I got the map out to see what other local ponds and lakes I could visit. So this was the first place I ended up, which is Gamerton Reservoir, 2 lakes, about 4 acres, and it's owned by South West Water, but it's managed by South West Lakes, which is a charitable trust who lease it out to an angling club who stock it annually with trout for fly fishing. So there were lots of Odonata flying around and peering at the algal mats that you can see out on the water, floating on the water. I was really pleased to see that some of them had red eyes, so that was something different. I took a photograph, sent it off to both Dave Smallshire and Andy McGeaney for expert identification, and they confirmed that it was small red-eyed damselfly, again a new record for the area. So I was really on a roll, and I was desperate to check out 2 other nearby South West Water reservoirs. But the nearest one, Jennet's, was behind a big metal security gate. You had to get into it by accessing it with a code. So frustratingly, I couldn't get in. And I wasn't really expecting much, not being an expert, but I thought, well, I'll have a go anyway. And I emailed South West Water saying I'd love to go and visit the reservoir to see what Odonata were up there. And much to my delight, I quickly had a very friendly reply from South West Lakes ecologist Emma Scotney. And she sent me the code, car sticker and the pass. And I was now officially a South West Lakes volunteer. So this is what I found behind the big metal security gate. Jennet's Reservoir, it's 8-acre reservoir, mostly shaded by trees, and it's always very brown and muddy, and it's nationally known by anglers for its enormous carp, so not a promising habitat for Odonata. But I did find scores of white-legged damselflies, which was another nice record, where there are a few areas of water lilies. And we also found exuvia, and that's the shed papery case that when the larvae climb out of the water, they change form, the adult emerges, and these little fragile cases are left behind, and that is definitive proof that the species is breeding there. So we knew there was a colony of white-legged damselflies living there. We also saw scarce chasers, which was another good species. So the third reservoir is Darracot, and that's about 3 acres, stocked with carp again, but it's not as muddy as Jennet's. And I saw large red damselfly up there, which I hadn't seen anywhere at the other two. But 2 years running, I've recorded small red-eye damselfly up there. Not good numbers, but they're definitely there, so I'll be keeping an eye on Darracot. And all 3 reservoirs are no longer used for supplying water, but they do remain the responsibility of South West Water, and they're managed with South West Lakes support. So, in the early summer of 23, I decided to focus on Gamerton as being the most species-rich, especially for the small red-eyed damselfly that I discovered the previous year. And as you can see, it was absolutely gorgeous up there. Lush, long grass, full of flowers, alive with insects, little insects and dragonflies and damselflies hunting them. And the aquatic vegetation had lots of Odonata laying their eggs into it. And lots of small red-eyed damselfly pitched out on the algal mats. However, this is what I found 2 weeks later. Devastation. South West Water contractors had mown right up to the hedge line and along the banks where the newly emerged Odonata first land to harden their wings. Everything was gone, the place was scalped, and to complete the devastation, I found the anglers had a competition and they'd pulled out most of the weed and algae, where previously there'd been a lot of laying going on, and they just heaped it up on the bank next to the water. But by an amazing coincidence, the next day I had a long-arranged meeting on site with South West Water's Biodiversity Action Officer, Hannah Bailey, together with their Chief Engineer, Jack, and they were very unimpressed by what they saw. So Hannah said that she'd arrange habitat training with the contractors to see if mowing schedules could be adjusted. And I said I'd talk to the anglers. So first of all, I met the chair of the club. Then I had another meeting walking around the site with about 8 anglers. And I rapidly realised that despite them showing me proudly damsel-shaped fishing flies, they hadn't got a clue about the life cycle of Odonata or the devastation they'd caused, and that it wasn't actually helping their fish because the fish are predating on the larvae and the adults when they can get them. So I did my best to encourage them to only remove the vegetation that they really needed to around their fishing swims. And I also pointed out that one person's hay fever was not really much of a justification for keeping the place tidy, which was another major theme, i.e. mowing everything that South West Water had left. So yeah, that winter I was invited to give an illustrated talk at their annual general meeting, and I showed them the photograph of the heaps of weed they'd dragged out, no doubt full of eggs, all the next generation just destroyed. And one of them said quietly, "We have been vandals. Next year we will try and do better." So this brings us up to last year, and as you can see, the mowing was left a bit later, until early July, and it was somewhat less devastating with some wider margins left uncut, and the anglers were not pulling out as much weed. Sadly, the number of species that oviposit that lay their eggs into weed have yet to recover from the devastation of 2023. The small red-eye is still present on the site, but in very small numbers. But There are plenty of other species, black-tailed skimmers and a new species, migrant hawker, which I saw up there for the first time last year. So here's a list of what I've recorded so far at the 3 sites. The number of white-legged damsels and scarce chasers at Jennet's were unchanged, with good numbers of both in COP and in ovipositing. And I was asked to write a blog for South West Lakes online newsletter about my experiences as a volunteer, keeping the tone as positive as I could, given what had happened. So South West Lakes have recently revised their scheme for volunteers, and I'm now officially a site guardian. And this includes having a point of contact for two-way communication, submitting records of my hours and observations. I'm covered by their insurance, and I've committed to regular visits. And last year I had 2 other official site meetings up at Gamerton, one with South West Lakes Conservation Officer Laura D and Terry Nichols, her colleague, who's now employed by South West Lakes after years as a volunteer. And the other meeting was with Nicola Morris, who's the head of environment for South West Lakes. And both meetings were really positive, experienced professionals sparing their time to meet me up at Gamerton. So South West Lakes have got a stated public commitment to manage their sites for biodiversity, but with the ideal comes the actual. There was mention of possibly commissioning specialist surveys at Gamerton. Its 2 lakes are bordered by unimproved grassland, which is not a common habitat these days, with some unusual plants and fungi, including ballerina waxcap, which is nationally scarce. There was mention of selecting Gamerton as a flagship site for demonstrating how to improve biodiversity by adjusting management. But as far as I know, that's not happened, and there have been no specialist surveys. The reservoirs have to be maintained for safety. It's a legal obligation under the Reservoirs Act of 1975. And Gamerton especially, because it's Victorian and the dams are constructed of earth, unlike the other 2, which are concrete. And that means that all structurally vulnerable areas have to be kept mown, so that if there is a problem developing, it'll become obvious very quickly. So it all looks great on the website, but I do understand that actually initiating positive change is complex, and hence my title, Striking a Balance. The Angling Club are paying for their sport, so their needs have to be considered. And all 3 sites are, I suspect, as much a liability for South West Water as an asset. But I really hope that with South West Lakes' involvement, their stated commitment to biodiversity, especially at Gamerton, could be further developed. Jennet's and Darricot have minimal management issues affecting Odonata, so I'm less concerned about them. But I will keep on emailing, visiting and doing what I can for Gamerton. Maybe this year there'll be more Odonata and the algae will be full of small red-eyed damselfly again. I really hope so. So I'll finish now with the slide that concluded my talk to the Gamerton Anglers AGM. So thanks to Dave Smallshire again for organising that really great day on the 1st of March. To our North Devon Dragonfly captain Andy McGeaney for all his teaching and all the fun that we have going out looking at dragonflies. To Stover Country Park, which was a lovely venue for hosting the event, and to all you people out there. So thank you very much for listening. Bye.